Welcome to the Book Binge. I am your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today we're following up on a review that I did just a couple days ago of Stephen King's book, Cujo, and going to go over all of his early career stuff, 9 of his early career books, to do another tier list. I'm dropping books over here because some of these are slippery and I am a fool. But yeah, we're going to cover 9 books of what Stephen King wrote early in his career, doing part 2 of a Stephen King tier list. Pretty similar to my review of, what was it, Sphere by Michael Crichton last week, where I discovered that it had been an entire year since I'd covered Michael Crichton on the channel, despite it feeling like it was just a few months ago. Another thing happened like that here. I feel like my previous tier list, my first episode of the Stephen King tier list, was just a few months ago. It wasn't. Even though I felt like it was like the middle of last summer or something like that. No, it was last March. It's been basically a year since this happened. 2025 was just a crazy year. It was a bad reading year. I had 3 books left of Stephen King's to read to be able to make this list according to how I structured it at the time, and I just didn't have time to read it over the course of the year, basically. Like, I got through a couple of them, but way later than I intended to, and so the point is I finally got through Cujo, just reviewed it a couple days ago, and now we are ready to actually do part 2 here, so you can go ahead and take a look at what my tier list looks like at this point, and the way that I have things looking for the purposes of ranking them. So there is a chance that at some point in this series, I don't know if that's going to be today or not, but there might be a point while I'm covering Stephen King's work that I add a new tier above Top of the Tower that's like, personal favorites or something like that, just to, call out some of the ones that I think are extra special, even beyond being near perfect books, in my opinion, for one reason or another. Because as is, I think that these 5 categories are not quite as specific as I would like them to be, so there's a chance that I'll just be able to add more tiers as I continue to go along this series. We'll see about that, but for now, this is what my list looks like after having done The Dark Tower last year, with my tiers being The Top of the Tower, obviously. Fantastic books, basically the 5 out of 5 books. Maybe not all of the 5 out of 5 books are going to be here, but the ones that I think that are extra special for one reason or another. It's Got the Shine are basically going to be the 4 and 5 out of 5 books, the ones that don't make it up here, and that I think are not worth snubbing by saying average for one reason or another. So books that are great, but maybe not quite favorites or not quite that extra level of special. Average, don't take that word too serious here. I don't necessarily think that these books that I put in here are average in the sense of like, oh, they're just fine, because some of them I like a lot, like The Gunslinger and Went Through the Keyhole. I actually like these books a solid amount. It's just that compared to some of these others, they don't have a little bit of the extra oomph that gives them the shine, I guess, so to speak. The next tier is God is Cruel, Sometimes He Makes You Live, and this is definitely a little bit of an overblown, like, negative title here. It's going to be books that I maybe still enjoy for one reason or another, but, don't like as much as I would like to, or maybe dislike a little bit more than I actively like for one reason or another. Those are going to be the books that end up here. And then, seriously, What the Heck, Steven is the tier for like books that I actually legitimately think are bad or even garbage, right? Because as a whole, I tend to like basically everything I like, or everything I read to one degree or another. Sorry, I've used that phrase like a million times today. I do a lot of recording whenever I record. I bulk record, so sometimes I say things over and over because that's my brain turning off. But anyway, I tend to enjoy most of the things that I read as a rule, and I tend to enjoy them more than I don't. For example, Song of Susanna is still a 3-star book. The fact that it's in God is Cruel, Sometimes He Makes You Live makes it sound like I disliked this book. I didn't. There are things that I can pretty heavily criticize about it, but it doesn't mean that I disliked it. The bottom tier is going to be relegated to the books that I legitimately dislike for one reason or another. There, I said the phrase again. I'm so sorry. But spoiler alert, there's not going to be any books added to the very bottom tier. So everything's going to be in these first 4. With that being said, I do have the next 9 books to cover for this series right here, starting with Carrie, going all the way through Cujo. So let's begin. Where am I going to put Carrie on the tier list? And I think that to start, Carrie is honestly a really great debut, and there's a lot of things about it that are super iconic, right? And a lot that I really respect about it as well as a result. You know, it's a great book, it has great moments, it has some great characterization, obviously the iconic ending, fantastic material as a whole, but it doesn't fully come together the way that a lot of King's other early material does. I'm going to put Carrie in average, and I'm probably going to put it in the middle of average for now, in between Wind Through the Keyhole and The Gunslinger. That's because I think that Carrie is solid, but it doesn't have the little extra special thing that makes it better than average in this particular case. It is iconic, it is part of the cultural zeitgeist in a way that is really interesting, but it's not, as a book, that much extra special to justify putting it any higher than this to me. Salem's Lot is also going to be a book that I'm probably going to put this in It's Got the Shine. And the question is where in It's Got the Shine. I think it's going to be at the top of It's Got the Shine for now, because I think Salem's Lot is really great. I do think it is slightly overrated in the sense that I don't think it's one of Stephen King's best books, the way that some other people like to frame it, but it is genuinely fantastic read. It's also ironic that it comes right here above Wolves of the Calla, because Wolves of the Calla serves in some part like an indirect sequel of certain aspects of Salem's Lot, which is kind of fun. But yeah, Salem's Lot is really, really solid. It's great. But it doesn't quite have the top of the tower appeal to me like the way The Shining does, which I'm going to put at the top of the tower, ironically, because The Shining, I think, so far is my favorite Stephen King book. There's just nothing that I disliked about that book. I got so invested in that book while I was reading it at the time that I had to take a break from it for a couple days to remind myself, like, this isn't real life. This isn't actually affecting you personally. So stop reading it and treating it like it is. Just slow down a bit, buddy. And that's what I had to do. That is how much it genuinely affected me. And I loved everything about that book. Ironically, it is also a case of, I think there's a little bit of it that is a little bit overhyped or something like that. That whatever scene it is, the room, whatever the room number is, I don't even remember the room number. Is it 217, 237, whatever the room number is? I probably have that completely wrong, but I think that chapter is actually a little bit overhyped as far as people saying it's one of King's scariest scenes, but does that really matter? I don't think it really matters. The entire book is just phenomenal. I do, like I said, think that it is one of his best. Next up, we're going to talk about the out-of-print book, Stephen King's only out-of-print book, and that is Rage. I unironically really like Rage, actually. I'm going to put it in God is Cruel, Sometimes He Makes You Live, because there are aspects of it that are... Man, I think I'm actually going to put it at the bottom of God is Cruel, Sometimes He Makes You Live, actually, because, yeah, I like the book. And I respect the book, and I do think that the book does a pretty good job exploring some things in certain ways that are actually really interesting and, in some sense, maybe even important, ways that have been discounted on account of its reputation and the fact that even Stephen King kind of disowns it. But I do think that Rage is actually a great book. The problem is that it's a little bit tedious to read, and there are some portions of it that are like, okay, this is going on a little bit long. It's a little bit boring at times. It's not fully there, right? The things that it does well, it does quite well. And I do think as a whole, it is better than it is not. But it is a bit tedious to read. Like I said, it's even a little bit boring depending on how you think about it. So it does suffer from some things, and that's going to be why it's in God is Cruel. But I actually do really like Rage. So I'm going to be that guy. The Long Walk is also going to be a book that is going to be in It's Got the Shine, but I think it's going to be at the bottom of It's Got the Shine, and that feels really bad to say for me, because I really love The Long Walk, and it's really engaging, and its movie adaptation outside of the last 5 minutes is incredible, but The Long Walk is also like... How else can I say it doesn't have that same special oomph without just saying that same thing again, because there is something about it that I didn't find as inherently special the second time when I reread it a couple years ago, as opposed to when I read it the first time back in 2020 when I really loved that book. Most of that has to do with the ending didn't really click for me the same way the second time. But overall, I do still think it's great. You know, it's got the shine. It's a great book. I think it is really worth reading. Don't overlook it. The fact that it is one of, if not his earliest written novel in his life, is actually very impressive as well. So, you know, it's going to go and it's got the shine. It's great. Night Shift as well. I'm actually going to put in it's got the shine. See, this is part of the reason why I might have to split some of these into more categories as the series goes on, because there's going to eventually just be so many, and like it's got the shine and that sort of, for me, average 4 out of 5, because when I rate books on Goodreads, 4 out of 5 is the one that has the most ratings, and 5 out of 5 has a lot of ratings as well. So there's going to be a lot of things that fit at in this range of books. So I might have to split it at some point. But Night Shift, I think, is really, really great. There's like one story in there that I despise, and there's a couple other stories in there that I don't really like. But out of 20 stories, I want to say there's like 16 of them that I would rate at like a 4.5 or better, or sorry, at a 4 out of 5 or better, maybe 3.5 out of 5 or better. Books or stories that I enjoy more than I don't for the most part, and so many of those stories are just fantastic. I really loved my experience of reading Night Shift. It's really only like 2 stories that bring it down from being top of the tower, to be honest. Just as a short story collection, this had huge potential to be up here, but there's like that one story that I absolutely loathed, and then like 2 more stories that I didn't particularly like, or rather that I actively disliked, you know, and then a handful more that weren't as great as they could have been. But for a short story collection, I do think that Night Shift is really great, so it's going to be up there. The Dead Zone, we're going to put at... Do I put it at the bottom of top of the tower for now? Like I said, some of these things are going to change as the series goes along. I already know that, between adding categories and moving books around, because I have the freedom to move books around if I feel like I need to. But The Dead Zone, I think, is super good. I also think it is very overlooked as far as King's early career goes. This is one that's like, it's going to be in conversation with Salem's Lot. Like the top of It's Got the Shine versus the bottom of Top of the Tower. Both of these books could be in either this spot or this spot. Salem's Lot is one that I think is slightly overhyped, because it is really great, but as far as his early career goes, I don't think it's his best, because The Shining is his best. But The Dead Zone is one that I don't think enough people talk about, especially in the context of his early career. When you're talking about, you know, his first handful or 2 books that he wrote, nobody talks about The Dead Zone being one of the better ones, but it is one of the better ones. Genuinely one of the better ones. I think I am going to leave it behind Salem's Lot, and for now I'm going to put Salem's Lot to Top of the Tower, actually. For now, both of these are 4 out of 5 stars that I rounded up to 5, I think. So just know that these two are in conversation with one another, both being at the very bottom of this tier and very top of this tier. That's where I'm going to put these for now. And like I said, I do reserve the right to be able to change any of these at any point if I want to. Firestarter is going to be the next Stephen King book, and that is one that is interestingly in conversation with The Dead Zone, but that's more topically. It has a very supernatural approach and certain structural ideas that make it very similar to The Dead Zone, and arguably even too similar. The fact that it came out right after The Dead Zone, you know, back-to-back years, The Dead Zone and then Firestarter, means that the fact that they are so similar is also kind of off-putting. I think that the first half of Firestarter is great. I think that the back half is a little bit weaker. I actually like the ending a good bit overall, so I'm going to leave it above God is Cruel, even though I thought I would probably put it in God is Cruel, Sometimes He Makes You Live category. But for now, I'll put it in average. It's a book that I wish was more than it was, and that was also kind of impossible to be more than it was, because it was just way too similar to The Dead Zone was in very many ways, and reminded me too much of The Dead Zone, made me wish I was reading The Dead Zone again instead of it, and that's kind of a sin to commit in that respect. Even though I do really like it in a lot of ways, it's not what The Dead Zone is, and The Dead Zone is great, so, you know, that's where that goes. And Cujo, I'm probably going to put in the same tier of average here. But I think I'm going to put Cujo above Carrie, but not above the Gunslinger, because the Gunslinger, especially on a reread after having finished that entire series, just means so much and is so good. Cujo's going to go above Carrie, because I do think that it is a really good execution of what it is doing, actually. I think that it is a little bit underrated, at least underhyped, because, well, I think underrated is an appropriate term for Cujo, actually, at least amongst my friend group, because a lot of them consider it to be like pretty mid amongst King's career, but I thought that it was better than mid. The fact that it is an average might make it seem like I'm saying it's mid, but books that I would call mid for one reason or another are more like these books. Like I said, I tend to enjoy things more than I don't. But Cujo is really good. The main problem with it is that it is not... The main thing that the book is doing is not the rabid dog thing. And if people are expecting it to be the rabid dog thing the entire time, it's not. It is more a family drama, and the way the rabid dog affects the family dramas in there is a big part of it, sure, but it is not about a rabid dog. It just isn't. And not knowing that before going in means that you might enjoy it less. Once I kind of understood what the book was actually doing after the first 100 pages, I was like, okay, I'm actually really into this. And that meant that I really enjoyed it. So I enjoyed it a lot overall, but it's not going to end up in the it's got the shine. So like, I understand why it is pretty mid amongst King's works, because I mean it is, like, look at where it's ranked in here, but I do think it is a little bit better than a lot of people give it credit for. So you gotta love rankings and tier lists and stuff like that, making nuance and all of that fancy internet jargon where it doesn't exist impossible. But this is going to be, for now, at the end of my second tier list for Stephen King where I rank stuff. For one final time, we will say, as the series continues on, as I continue to read more of his books, it is very likely that the next time I go to record, I start off the video with a completely new look on this, because I'll probably add some new tiers. I'll add some new ranks in there to kind of go in between some stuff, and I'll move some things around, adjust them where they are in accordance, because as we move on, there's just going to be too many books for this few tiers to really work and make sense. The man's written, upwards of 80 books at this point over the course of his life, and I've only read, a dozen and a half of them, so it is going to be definitely something that I do next time, but next time's going to be quite a while from now, all things considered, because the next one, I think I have another 9 books, well, 8, I think 8 novels and 1 novella that I need to get through before I'm going to do the next Stephen King tier list video, and although I do basically plan to read 3 of those books this year, I plan to read Roadwork and The Running Man this year, and then I also plan to read Different Seasons, what is Different Seasons a novella collection? I think it's a novella collection. So I do plan to get through all of those this year if I can. But outside of getting through those this year, I'm not sure how quickly I'm going to get through the other 5 or 6 items that I need to get through for the tier list. So I'm going to do my absolute best to, get through those books relatively quickly, but I just read too slow, and also read too many other things besides Stephen King for that to be feasible. If you're watching this video and expecting for part 3 to come out anytime within the next year, it's not happening. Even within the next 2 years could be a little bit of a stretch depending on how quick I read. So this is less of a regular series for the channel and more of a as I get through King's work. If you want to see me review more of King's stuff, I recommend checking out a Stephen King playlist that I have over here, because, I have read a solid amount of his books. I've read all of The Dark Tower, plus these other 9 books, and I've done a couple of other Stephen King topic videos as well. So if you want to see me cover any of that stuff, I have that playlist. I have those other videos that you can check out. Many of those videos from so early in the channel that basically nobody's ever seen some of those videos, like the Dark Tower reviews. Nobody's watched basically any of those. Yeah, that's going to be the end of this tier list. Don't expect part 3 anytime soon, because it's probably going to be a couple years. Unironically going to be a couple years before I've actually read enough for me to want to do another one. So this is like a very, very long-term project. Even if I read only Stephen King books, it would still take me probably 3 years or so. It would definitely take me at least 2 more years just to read all of the rest of his stuff. let alone make all those videos. And I'm not only reading Stephen King, I'm reading a lot besides Stephen King. So just warning you there, but I do plan to read more King this year. I do have at least 3 of his books on the docket for the pretty much immediate future. I'll try to read through his books quickly enough to make these releases at least semi-regular, but you know, there's hard to call it semi-regular when I release like 150 book binge episodes a year, and I'm only going to have another one of these in like 2 years or something like that. But in any case, thank you for watching this. If you did, I really appreciate it. Let me know what you think about these books. Compare what you have to say about your ranking compared to mine. I would definitely be really interested to see what that looks like for sure. But yeah, for now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video, even though it's definitely not going to be Stephen King related.